Hey everybody, this is Nate Leber here at Leber Design and Print in the ongoing whatever pandemic we're under to try and find knowledge, information, and help everyone learn. I brought another one of my friends in today. His name is Chris Kane. He's a long industry veteran at this point. He's got over 20 years in working in data center network engineering primarily. I don't think I messed that up too much, but he's way smarter than me. And so I brought him in today to ask him a few questions and see what all we can learn from him, what he's doing right now, and just kind of set the stage there. So this is Chris Kane, and say hey and tell us how the heck you got to where you are now and what that's looked like.
Oh yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me on. This is neat. You and I run in very different circles, obviously. I'm an IT person. You're in printing currently, primarily. But having been neighbors and having getting to know you, I really appreciate the fact that we can get together and talk about our worlds and learn from each other, right? It's been amazing when you open up and kind of realize you need to look out just outside your circle of competence into adjacency areas. Sometimes other people solve problems in their world that could solve problems in your world. So I appreciate the chance to talk to you. Networking, for me, I stumbled into it. I started college and then realized it wasn't really my scene, at least not at the time and at the age. So I bailed and joined the U.S. Navy. Got sucked into the whole go see the world type of thing. But part of that, my job ended up being a radio man at the time, is what we were called. And essentially that grew into IT. And I really enjoyed it. Didn't realize how much I enjoyed it until after I got out and I started working for the telephone company. And then I started working after that for an internet service provider. And that's when I realized I actually loved networking. I liked the idea of being able to make two things talk to each other over great distances, or being able to connect people. For someone that's not necessarily the most outgoing person, I am a bit of an introvert to some extent. It's funny that communications or setting up pathways for people to talk is really what I do. But yeah, it's just been a journey of staying up with the technology over the past 20 years. And I enjoy the rate of innovation. It's never stale. Our technology grows by leaps and bounds every single year. And so it helps my continuous learning. I don't go, my world is not one where you just, clock in at 9 and clock out at 5 and you're done. It's you're working 10-hour days, and then you're doing a lot of just-in-time research at night and on weekends. And that's actually, it's been something I've enjoyed because it just gets me to keep reading the books, keep trying to improve a little bit every day.
Awesome. Gosh, I've learned a ton from you over the years, and I specifically value my relationship with you as well, because not only are you smart and insightful, but like you said, you come from a different industry, and so often I can take things that I'm hearing from you and bring it back with us and implement it. And it just helps us be better in general. So currently we are in the midst of the pandemic, which is such a strange word to use, and one you don't think about in the modern era using, because I don't think of people dying of malaria. I feel like that's olden days. But here we are. So what are you seeing from your standpoint? What has it changed for you? And what adjustments are you making?
Oh yeah, great, good, all good questions. And first, hey, for whatever inconveniences I have in my life or adjustments I'm making in my life, my heart goes out to those people that are on the front line. There are parts of the country and the world that are getting hit harder than others. And you see those stories, and the doctors and nurses and medical professionals and all the staff, the supporting staff around them, every part of an organization that's working 14-hour days plus, and just the situation they're in, that just is probably so foreign to us here in the U.S. It's something maybe historically you would have seen in third world countries, and I think some of these we've got these pockets of areas that they're dealing with incredibly challenging situations. So I just first, thoughts go out to them, thinking about them. For us in IT, we're busy. IT organizations are having to deal with the change in the nature of how people are working. So since so many states have a stay-at-home order, a lot of people are working from home now that haven't before. For an IT staff, that's had a big impact on them, whether it's at the remote worker laptop level, or getting an IP phone out to somebody to be able to use, or the flow of data is showing up in different places than it did before. So if I worked inside of an organization, and the access that I had to data there has now changed, and my remote workers need to get to that data. So parts of the network may have not initially been built to absorb or expand to take on those workloads. So we have a lot of people that are very busy trying to build out the infrastructure, whether that's adding equipment or just reconfiguring what they have to prioritize how that data flows. It's been neat to talk to some of my peers. So I spend a lot of time with a user group that we started a little over 3 years ago called the Ohio Networking User Group. And it's for Ohio. We primarily hold events in Columbus and Cincinnati and Cleveland. We've done the event in Toledo. Like every quarter, we get together and have 50 or 60 people get together for beers and talk about the industry. And we recently did, because of COVID, we couldn't get together physically, so we did a virtual happy hour. And the neat part was to hear from people what they're working on, whether it's there's a lot of nonprofit support going on right now, where people are donating IP phones or donating their access to equipment, or in some cases, manufacturers are actually donating equipment to school systems or to healthcare systems, where they're trying to support things like telemedicine.
Wow.
Or they're trying to support things like distance learning. So, trying to keep the kids in a homeschooled environment or schooling from home. That can be a challenge depending on where they live. They may not have the infrastructure to support that. So I've heard some really creative ideas lately. A friend of mine was telling me a story where they're using the school buses. Since the school buses aren't used for transportation right now, they're using them as Wi-Fi hotspots. So in rural areas where maybe all the students don't have broadband access or decent internet access to their house, they could pull up in a car in a parking lot, sit in the car, and actually connect an iPad or a laptop to the Wi-Fi that's being hosted by the bus. That therefore gives them a decent method of connection, so that they can still continue to learn, get their homework assignments, interact with their teachers. Seeing the same thing with telemedicine, where a lot of people are trying to build out their infrastructure kind of on the edge of the hospital. Mm-hmm. So instead of you coming indoors, hey, maybe you can show up, we can take your temperature, and then, hey, we realize you don't need to physically see a physician. We could address your problem remotely. So just keeping them in the parking lot and use an iPad, and right on the other side of the wall inside the hospital, they get to talk to a doctor. So all these are areas and problems people are trying to solve. There's one equipment manufacturer that's donating hardware to customers that, their customers are like, hey, well, just take it. We know you need to build out the infrastructure to take all this connectivity. And I saw one equipment manufacturer that donated a bunch of video equipment to help with the telemedicine. So it's been, I know some people work from home. They may be struggling to stay busy for throughout the workday, but I can tell you most people in IT are overwhelmed. They're very busy, trying to just keep up. How do I help the business keep moving, even when people are remote? So and they've all run on thin staffs to begin with. So much like we're finding out other supplies and surplus there might not be such a thing as surplus. Right. And they're finding out that, hey, since they didn't build for extra capacity, right? There's a cost associated with building for capacity, and sometimes you can't justify that cost. Right. And they're finding out right now, because they don't have those resources, they got to figure out a way around it.
Well, it sounds like you're seeing a lot of collaboration within your industry and with those outside of it, and a lot of innovation as well.
Yeah, collaboration for sure. Where we're working with a lot of customers to help them. It's not a sales situation.
Right.
It's how can I help you? Let me look at your equipment and the way you have it set up, and let me see if I can help you get more out of the equipment.
Right.
It's not so much, hey, buy a box from me or buy hours of professional services or consulting from me. Let's just roll up our sleeves and figure out how to stitch this together in a better way to absorb what you have.
Right. How do we
And that's
solve
where,
what we have now?
yeah, and that's where the OHNUG community has been so helpful. So the OHNUG community, we started the Ohio Networking User Group because a couple of us were sitting around together one day, and we noticed, in IT, there are, to an outsider, if I say IT to you, it could mean 500 different things, right?
I don't even know what it means half the time.
Right. There's, hey, does that mean it's my laptop? Does that mean it's my phone? Does that mean it's programming? Does that mean you're a programmer? Kind of, inside of IT, there's just a ton of silos and specialties. And networking is where I spend my time. And what we noticed is, over the past couple of years, there's been a big trend for the development community, the programming community. There's a lot of innovation going on there, and they're sharing that information with one another. So they're kind of, in some ways, they're setting aside intellectual property, and they're collaborating to solve problems. And we noticed, well, in order to do that, you've got to interact with people. You've got to actually get together and talk. And I'd say a vast majority of IT is we're more introverts than we are extroverts. But we noticed in networking, we weren't actually talking to one another. A lot of times network engineers like myself, someone that has a specialty, I wasn't talking to my peers. I tend to get information just from whichever manufacturer I work with. Or we may go to events, but those events were sponsored by a manufacturer. So therefore, it's more of a sales convention, to give it a label. So what we decided is, why don't we try to form a group where we get people to talk to each other, where we set aside, the labels of who we work for. It doesn't matter the name on the t-shirt that I'm wearing today. Let's just talk about the industry in and of itself. What's working, what's not working. It's set the marketing aside. And so we decided what it'd be what we call a safe area or a safe zone, meaning there's no sales. You're not here to be sold to, because that's what happens to all of us all day long. And I think that's why some of us get numb even to good messages, where you just block that out because you just feel like you're being sold to all the time. So this group, the idea was hey, there'll be no selling. We'll just be very, what we call vendor neutral.
Right.
And it has grown well beyond what we ever expected. We're over 750 members now in the Ohio Networking User Group. And we've had other folks approach us and say they'd like to do the same things in their states. So we started a Michigan Network Users Group, what we call the OHNUG, and we're working next on Indiana and Minnesota. So India, probably based out of Indianapolis, and a team based out of Minnesota, in Minneapolis, where we'll try to replicate that there as well. Where, hey, let's, once we can all get back together, let's find a venue, let's get together, let's have a couple presentations and a couple panelists, and let's just talk. Let's set aside the sales element, and just truly network, like socially network with each other, not just technology networking. And it's been great. I'm super proud of it, because it's just grown into something I would never have imagined it'd be as big as it is. And I really appreciate, just earlier this week, having this virtual happy hour, having established relationships with these people and talking and hearing these stories, and then being able to help one another. I mean, part of this get together was, hey, I have these cycles, or I have these resources, if anybody needs them. There was a lot of that during that call. Hey, if you need anything, this is what I have, and this is what you could use, or these are the it's third-party references. Hey, I know a person that knows a person that could solve that problem for you. And it's been wonderful to have such a community to share information with.
So the broad term IT, for the common person, what I think of that is this whole thing, and I don't even know what all it entails, but there's so many different things in it. And most anybody that works in it kind of works in one smaller area because it is so broad. You can't do everything, it sounds like very few people do everything. So you collaborate obviously a lot, and you're networking more, and everyone's kind of in their different areas. What are the best things for you? What builds the best relationships? When you're looking at either bringing in third party people or vendors or whatever, what are the key things for you and the primary things you like to see that build that relationship for you, and yet aren't, will truly help you and not just go into that sales pitch mode either?
Yeah, great question. So for me, if I'm going to work with a third party or a new vendor, a new technology partner is an example. I usually start with, what do I know about them? What does the industry say about them? So what is their reputation, both globally as well as locally? So a lot of these organizations are global. So it could be vast, your experience with an organization can be very different, location by location. So, so I start, hey, what does the industry have to say about them? Where do they play? What are their strengths and weaknesses? And then I start to drill down, who in my tribe, who in my community knows them,
Okay.
and how can I get introduced to them, and then meet the local people, right? So get beyond the sales part of it and just get down to them, because in a lot of ways my interaction with them is not a sales situation. Usually we're partnering to solve a problem. We're not actually selling to each other necessarily. But then another part of it is, if I'm going to do either business with them or spend time with them, I really need to figure out if I like them.
Right.
Frankly, I don't want to spend time with people I don't like. I don't have much time. And if I'm going to spend it with somebody, to me, I damn well better like them.
Yeah.
I think it was a podcast to give a shout out to Tim Ferriss or maybe it was somebody on his podcast. There was an exercise that he introduced that I found super helpful for me. And I don't know if you've done this, Nate. He mentioned it was something to the effect of, go back in your calendar over the previous year and write down every meeting you had and the people that were in that meeting. And, on a piece of paper, on the left side, write down if you liked them. And on the right side, write down if you didn't like them, right? So you could go down this list and you start to get an idea of who you like, why you like them, or who you don't like and why you don't like them. And you start to figure out who you really want to spend time with. And it was a good exercise. One, it helped me figure out where I'd been spending my time and who I had been spending time with. And it also gave me a chance to figure out who I wanted to spend time with, who I wanted to minimize my time with. But then looking internally a little bit, analyzing why did I want to spend time with? Like, if I put someone in the like column where I want to spend more time with them, why was that? Was it personal? Was it because they brought something to the game that I didn't have, right? Professionally? Were they a good fit? Were they a good collaborator? So I like the idea of you start big and then just whittle it down to get very, very local, I guess, is how I try to approach in my interaction with the third parties.
Awesome. I think for me, I probably am not maybe that analytical about how I look at people and interactions, but for me, specifically with the business and looking at customers or vendors or whatever, a way that helps me narrow it down is just any project we did or any time that we spent on it. And I'm like you, I'm introverted by nature. Either the project and the whole task can either energize me or it can drain me.
Yeah.
And when I leave a meeting or whatever, or we wrap up a big project or whatever, sometimes you're like, whoa, that was freaking awesome. I want to do more of that. It's almost, I don't know, euphoric in that sense of it, or it didn't drain you. And then other times it does. And I think that's an easy way for me to split it up and go, that was awesome. It didn't feel like a suck on my life, and let's do more of that. And so that's an easier way for a more simple-minded person like me to break that up.
No, I think that's awesome to recognize that is, hey, this feels good, and then just why does it feel good and who do I want to spend time with, whether it's immediate I don't know if it's instant gratification for you revenue wise and business wise, or if you see a longer term relationship there that's a multiplier for you.
Right. A lot of times it's just the relationship. It doesn't even have to do with the associated dollar value. Sometimes that is a byproduct of it, but a lot of times it was just like, that was just fun. I think this could go somewhere bigger. Let's do more of that. So awesome. Well, one last question.
Sure.
Talked about OHNUG a little bit. Tell me more about that. Tell me how people that are interested in that, specifically like who is it for and how they can get involved and contact you.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So we're pretty specific as far as this is about computer networking, I guess it's at its most base. And in working, it's usually about enterprises, larger organizations, and how they run their computer networks, whether that's data centers, remote sites, remote offices, cloud. Of course, you hear about cloud all the time, but it's public cloud. To these organizations for public cloud, especially like right now where they can't get to their assets inside of their data centers that they own, or their assets can't scale. What can they do with public cloud to scale out to absorb these workloads or the change in the data traffic patterns? So for us, the OHNUG, a little over 3 years we've been running now. You can find us at OHNUG.org. To come to one of our meetups would be, usually we host them at a brewery. Usually we have one or two presenters, and then a lot of times we do a panel.
Okay.
And on the panel, we try to mix it up where we have somebody maybe a security focus. So like personally, here's another example of the narrowness of IT where I appreciate security, and that there are people that specialize in that, but I don't spend any time with it myself.
Okay.
I'm more about stitching it together so people can work, and then they're more mindful of keeping an eye on that there's no vulnerabilities to that path. So those are the kind of meetings that we have. I think really reaching out to us beyond, even if you aren't really in networking, I think having done this for 3 years now and so many events, I think the biggest learning curve for us was event planning. How do you plan a good event? How do you plan an event, to your point, that people came to, they enjoyed, it's something they want to do? Our events are free. We'll usually have refreshments there throughout the evening. But it's been a very interesting, to me, it's been interesting to learn how to host a good event.
Okay.
It's about, and that's something we're definitely willing to share information with people, at least our experiences of, how do you pick the right venue?
Yeah.
Do you pay attention to the little things like, hey, do I need Wi-Fi for this event? Are people bringing laptops? Do I need to worry about power? I'll give you a very good example, parking. Some people will plan an event, especially like at a brewery. Breweries are great. They're aware that these go on, and it's a source of revenue for them to have this event space for us. But sometimes they're in a location where parking is horrible. Like, are my attendees going to be trying to park at a meter and worried about, hey, I only have a 2-hour window at a parking meter, and I'm going to run out of a 4-hour event to go feed money into a parking meter, or refresh an app on their phone to feed a parking meter. So it's little things like that I think that we've benefited from that we'd love to share with others. So you can find us at OHNUG.org.
Okay.
And reach out. There's a contact link there, and we'd be happy to talk to anybody. Or you could just come to one of our events. We have all the events there. We tend to use meetup.com we have people sign up there. That way you can RSVP for an event. It gives us an idea how many people are coming to an event. And so either the OHNUG site or meetup is how you can reach us.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate your time and sharing this information with everyone.
Thanks, Nate. Stay safe, man, and keep the business rolling, buddy.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Take care, man.